Well, good afternoon. I'm Julie Broadway, President of the American Horse Council. We're delighted to have you for our second quarter webinar. And it's hard for me to imagine that it has been since November of 2020 when Sarah spoke with us last. Boy, time has just flown by. We're recording the session today, so you can hear it again afterwards if you'd like to re-listen or pass it on to friends. We'd love for you to share that. Let me just tell you a little bit about Sarah. Most of you know her because when she was with us before, she spoke about her book, Horse Crazy, the story of a woman and the world in love with an animal. And it's an outstanding book, so check that out. But Sarah's really known for her work with the New York Times. She's been with them since August of 2011. And I have to tell you, she has got lots of awards to her credit. In 2015, she was recognized by the New York Newswomen's Club for her in-depth reporting. Later that year, she was named to the 2015 Forward 50, so a great accomplishment there. And she was a finalist for a Pulitzer Prize in 2016. So she's really put her mark on the map. That particular prize was really interesting because it was for a piece called Unvarnished, which was a year-long investigation into the New York City nail salon industry that she documented and talked about some of the labor practices and the health issues that manicurists faced. Who knew there was going to be a whole lot to dig into there? She has lived in London previously, and she is a graduate of Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, and she's just passionate about sharing what she does with us. And her bio closes with one important statement that's relative for all of us, which is she, great big letters, she loves horses, exclamation point. And so what she wants to do today is offer you some tips and some suggestions on how to tell your equestrian story and maybe turn your experience and your passion into a published piece of work or a film. Now, if this isn't enough to entice you for the whole thing, I got one little ad promo to offer you. If you weren't aware, Equine Network is sponsoring Horse Week again this year. I'm really excited about that. And they have a video film contest underway. And it is sponsored by Boehringer Ingelheim Equine Health. And you submit your video entries, and they can be 5 to 45 minutes in length. And there is a cash prize of $7,500.
Awesome.
And you can enter multiple videos. So if you do nothing out of today's session, take away that if you can shoot a little video and submit it, you too could be a winner in this kind of thing. And entries are due July the 15th. So you can read more about that on our website if you need something. So with that, I'm going to give Sarah the floor, and we'll do some Q&A, and feel free to put things in the chat if you are like me and you've got a short memory and you need to get it down on paper before you lose it. That's a good way to make sure we get it in there, and we'll circle back to questions as we get to the end. So Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One quick question, Julie. Can people show themselves on video if they want in this, or is it?
Yes, by all means. Oh, yeah. And where's Ashley? Yes, and Emily.
I was just going to say, we're such an intimate group. Why don't, if you feel comfortable, we can all have a little dialogue in this technological age. So thank you for the wonderful intro. You're totally right that at the bottom of my official New York Times biography, it says she loves horses, which is unusual in a New York Times reporter's world to express anything about themselves, really, right? Because we're never the story. We never use the word I or we or me. It's always about someone else. But horses are a huge, huge part of my personal story. And I only came out about it. I only came out as a horse girl about a year before my book came out. I was actually with a friend, and I was driving to the barn, and I called a friend, and I was saying, I really want to write a book. And he said, well, what would you write about? I said, well, the only thing that sustains me long enough that I want to spend a year of my life on it is horses. But, who the hell wants to hear about horses? And I also thought, horses, especially in the show jumping world that I'm involved in, are very associated with privilege, rightfully so, and to a degree wrongfully. And I was concerned I would be, pigeonholed or seen as maybe out of touch, because in my other life, I cover such, devastatingly hard subjects. And my friend Musa Okwonga, a terrific writer about a very specific subject, actually, soccer. He's a has 5 books out about soccer, his passion, as well as several other subjects. He said, Sarah, the only thing that matters in writing is it true? Is it a true passion? And I said, of course. And he said, well, that's what people want to hear. That's what sells books. That's what engages story. Is it true? And that kind of freed me. And I decided that, I wouldn't worry about being judged or pigeonholed or marginalized. I would worry, was the story true? And was it a truly felt passion? And so actually later that day, I pitched Simon and Schuster. I'd met with an editor about writing a book about my nail salon series, which I declined because I spent a year of my life on it. I felt I wrote everything I could. I called him up and I was like, I have another idea. It's not about labor practices and exploitative conditions and the workplace. It's about ponies. And actually, I pitched about a 500-word pitch, and they bought it the next day, which is really, really unusual and not how it happened. So I'm going to tell you the real steps that it takes to get your story told. And then I'll tell a little bit more about my own. So the first thing you need, so they say, let me do 2 tracks. I'm going to talk about a nonfiction work and a fiction work. So in the nonfiction world, you don't have to write the book first. That's very different than the fiction world, where you have to write the whole novel or the whole short story or the whole children's book, and you have to, that's what you sell. Nonfiction you sell based on a pitch. So a pitch would be, here's what I want to write about. And then you'll put together a pitch document, which will be a chapter outline and the structure and the story you want to tell. You'll also have to do some research into comparable titles. So for Horse Crazy, I looked around what other nonfiction memoirs are there about horses. And I wrote a sheet on comparable titles. I read them, wrote a sheet on comparable titles, and I said, here's where mine is different, right? Here's where mine's better, is what you're essentially saying. So that you submit that, and there are actually great templates for those submissions online that you can find. And I would highly recommend reading a couple of those and following them. That's what I did. So you submit a nonfiction book based on a proposal. Then a publisher will give you what's called an advance, which is money to write it. That advance can be anything from $5,000 to, the Obamas got $7 million. When you write a nonfiction book, the requirement is that they sell a certain amount of books to make back your advance, right? That's the publisher advancing you money. Then once it's sold, they make back the money. And after they've made back the money they advanced you, then you get what are called royalties, payments after. Same deal for a nonfiction book, but the nonfiction book, again, you have to have your whole book manuscript done. So how do you get that manuscript or that proposal to a publisher? Well, the traditional route is you get an agent, right? And the agent will represent you, and they have connections throughout the publishing world, and they take your book out to market. It's very, very challenging to get an agent. But the first step of getting an agent is researching comparable titles, figuring out who their agents are, and then reaching out to those agents. Because if you reach out to Stephen King's agent and you have a book, a horse book, they're never even going to read your stuff. But you can find the Universe of Agents. Agents' website lists comparable titles. They list stuff they're interested in. Or you can do the famous honed in the New York Times way, which is you look up the title of the book. This is how I do almost all my research. It's my big secret. Put it in quotes and then put the word my agent in quotes, because someone inevitably has talked about their agent in an article. And that's how you figure out it's my publicist, my mom, any one of those. I put so many things in quotes just to find people talk. Sometimes I put people's phone numbers in quotes because they've showed up elsewhere. Like when they were on the cheerleading team, they said like, call me if you want to go to cheer practice. And then it's still online somewhere. Quotes in Google are your best friend, secret weapon. Even emails in quotes, because very often you'll find other emails or other contacts of people's. Anyway, that's a big top secret journalism special sauce. So you're pitching to agents. That's one route. Again, it's super hard to get an agent. So what do you do when it's super hard to get an agent? There are many, many non-traditional routes to publishing now, which has really changed the game. And whereas self-publishing used to be a super dirty word, frankly, it's like, oh, you can't get it done, so you'll self-publish. Now it's entirely respectable. I have a friend called Scarlett Peckham, that's her pen name. She's a romance novelist. She actually publishes with I think HarperCollins, but she also simultaneously publishes herself. So she has 2 tracks of books because she likes the autonomy. And look, are you spending your own money on that? Absolutely. It's frustrating, but she makes it back. The other thing is you can crowdfund or kickstart a book. I'll give you an example. I have a bunch of books here. So this is a crowdfunded, kickstarted, self-published book. It's actually, this is the Black Cowboy Museum, a character in my book, Larry Callis, the man in the painting on the cover. He is the founder of the Black Cowboy Museum. You know, could Larry have gotten a book published about himself? I mean, maybe there's enough interest, but there's a limited audience. So that can be challenging to a publisher if you have an esoteric limited audience. But that limited audience really wants to hear Larry Callis' story. So I made a Kickstarter, promised everybody who got the book funded an early edition, and got the book out on shelves. And it's not a dirty word anymore. And there's even a really interesting publishing company called Unbound that is now working in a hybrid of self-publishing, Kickstarter, and official publishing. So Unbound it'll find somebody who has like, does your barn have a big social media following? You know, does your work, do you have a big Instagram thing? Like those are people that publishing companies want to capitalize on. So Unbound will get your book crowdfunded through your sources and it'll help you. And a book costs like 15 grand, believe it or not, to get off the ground. And then they will use the traditional route of marketing it and getting in bookstores and get you an editor. So that's like the routes to books. The routes to getting articles published are really quite different. And this is something I educate young journalism students on all the time, which is pick up the phone, figure out the publishing company or the name of the editor that you want to pitch a story to, and call them. You know, it's a little harder in the work from home era, but people are going back to the office. If you want to call someone at Vogue, right, there's a main number, you press 0, you tell the operator their name, and it actually rings at their desk, still this era. Another way to penetrate people is Twitter. When I have a great story idea, I find the editor of Chronicle of the Horse, for example, on Twitter, and I tweet at her. For some reason, God knows why, people ignore emails, but they don't really ignore tweets. You know, so when you have a good idea, it's really important to remember that it's a product that they need. You're not like disturbing anyone when you want to tell your story. You're actually giving them a product and you're of value. And especially people starting out are like, well, I don't want to approach the book. They need stories. You know, Chronicle of the Horse has pages to fill. The internet has made the page infinite. You know, Sidelines, Horse and Rider, you know, there are lots of different publications and they need the content you're providing. So part of it is all about confidence. And then I wanted to talk, and I can stop for questions at any point. I want to talk about the different types of books that are out there. So there's nonfiction, right? Memoir nonfiction, self-published memoir nonfiction. A genre that's really interesting and very, as a high demand for horse books is middle grade, what's like 8 to 14. This is by Carrie Seam, a friend of mine, Salim, I think you pronounce her name, Horse Girl. Middle grade is really interesting, and certainly lots of horse stories to be told because we were all crazy horse girls. And then there is reported nonfiction. This is one of my favorite ever books called Racehorse Men. It's by a historian called Kathleen Mooney, and it's Catherine Mooney, and it's about the erased legacy of slavery on the racetrack. And so that doesn't include her perspective at all. You know, it's reported nonfiction. And then picture books, which are the best. This is my favorite ever picture book, Barnaby and the Horses. Believe it or not, people think picture books you submit with pictures, like you have to be the artist. They're actually harder to get done in publishing houses. What they want is a great, compelling story, and then they'll find you the artist, which is totally not how you think of it as done. But it's a little bit harder to get them done when you come with the art as well. I don't actually understand why. Don't have an answer for that. But there's certainly, I hope this like demonstration shows there are many, many ways to get equestrian stories told. People want to hear them. I often say there's 7 million horse owners in America. Is that right, Julie? I think I got that stat from you.
There are 7.2 million horses in the US. There are 2 million horse owners.
Owners, right. 7.2 million, far more than there were our only way to get around, right? So they're totally useless, but they're of so much use in another way to us. And for every 7.2 million horses there are a million people who wish they were part of their lives. And there is a tremendous, I think, audience for the stories that you guys want to tell. And the last thing I'll talk about before I open it to questions is film. So I've recently embarked in this world of getting film stories done. And some of it is adaptations of articles I've written. Others is spin-offs from my book. But what you need there is you need an idea, which would be your IP, your intellectual property. It's a little bit easier to get a movie done when you have an actual finished product, an IP, which would be like a whole book or like a book idea. And then you can take that out. That you do have to work with agents. There are a couple different agencies that represent authors who want to get their intellectual property optioned, is the word for a movie. And then they will take those ideas out. Hollywood is quite a bit tough to penetrate. I think I have the privilege of having, the New York Times and as sort of like my calling card, and the book. But a book you create can be your own calling card that will open doors for you. So when you create a product, you can reach out to an agency. Hey, I have this good thing. Let's work together. And the one thing I will tell you about Hollywood, it's quite a bit less money than you think. So, people hear Hollywood and a film option, a book can get optioned for $5,000, and that's considered like pretty decent. Because once it gets made, optioning is the right for them to try to get it made. Once it gets made, you have other fees that you'll get paid. But it's so exciting to have a book optioned, but it's really chump change. And the huge majority of books never make it to film. And that's when you start to see real money. But for me, a lot of the stories I want to tell, such as the disenfranchisement of Black equestrians, a bunch of my stories and my upcoming book series are related to that, are worth it for me, but I don't need to make a ton of money on it. I really want those stories told. And I guess my last thing I'll say is that, again, I said that these people want your story. They are penetratable. Is that a word? These people seem like they're sitting high on a hill, but Elizabeth just mentioned her friend Ashley Davis, who made Black Beauty. Ashley Davis is on Instagram. Slide into her DMs, get in her comments. All these people, much more than say 10 years ago, are much more accessible. Finding, people you admire, people who hold the keys to the castle, you can get a conversation started with them now. And really, that's the first step into getting your story that you have in your heart gotten out into the wider world. I'm happy to take questions. We can also talk about writing process. This was more of a how does it work thing, but happy to open the floor.
Well, I'm going to get started with my question. So when people come to see me about a project or a proposal they would like for us to take on, I want to know, how big is the audience? How am I going to penetrate that audience? I sort of have to have a business case. Yes. Do you do that with a book or with a film? Do you have to have enough details to entice an agent or somebody to pay attention?
You do need that with a nonfiction book. Where you write comparable titles. I don't believe you need the comparable titles with a novel. If you're writing a nonfiction book, like Pitching Horse Crazy, I might say similar book Secretariat sold over 8 billion copies and, whatever. Like I'm trying to, that will be in your proposal for sure, a sheet. I don't think you have to do that with a novel, because novel's about taste and it's about the publisher agent is like, this feels beautifully written. This feels meaningful to me. You don't want to write the same novel somebody else wrote. You do have to try to stand out. But I don't think you have to put out a business plan for a novel. In terms of a movie, when I have gotten my ideas in front of Hollywood tastemakers, I do say the things I just said to you guys. There are 7.2 million horsemen. I mean, I make the claim you have an audience built in. And also I say, and this story hasn't been told, so there's a level of modeling, but they're also going to do their own research. So they'll get off the phone with you and look into it and look how comparable titles sold and audience figures for similar themes.
That's good to know. I frequently have people that call me that are, going to invest in a product development, that kind of thing. And they're doing their own due diligence before they'll invest in it. But we don't have people that call us and say, Sarah's pitched this idea and we'd like to, verify some of her facts and get some more details, but they don't call for that. So I'm just kind of curious how that all works.
Well, I put facts from your horse fact sheet in my pitch. So they didn't call you. You were already there.
Cool.
That's why you're such a great resource.
Other questions you guys have got? I don't want to monopolize this. Anybody?
What are stories about the horse world you're still looking forward to telling that you feel like you haven't explored yet?
Yeah, I'm really interested in who the horses belong to, in an emotional sense. I think that horses themselves are deeply democratic. As the great horse whisperer Monty Roberts says, they only demand one thing, which is that we're their safe place to be. And yet we've really larded them up with a lot of other meanings that they don't themselves come. Horses don't care about wealth or class or whether you have a Sam Shield helmet or a Troxel helmet. I think there's some really, really interesting stories about horses and identity. I touch on it in Horse Crazy. The Indian rite of Bharat, which is riding a horse to your wedding, what the grooms do. I'm sure you've seen that amazing spectacle. It's precluded from a huge class of people, the Dalits or untouchables. There's a burgeoning Dalit movement to ride your horse to your wedding. And some of them have been killed on their way to their wedding for daring to do such a thing. And I just think there's like really interesting conversations about class and identity in horses that are not just about the ones we've been having in the wake of Black Lives Matter here, with inclusion and that's gotten really prominence of Black cowboys really elevated their story, but they're worldwide. I also think there's a tremendous amount of abuse that needs to be uncovered in the horse world. From what's been going on with what the heck is his name? The Grim Reaper of horses. What's the guy? Come on. Just got banned from Churchill Downs. Come on, everybody.
Baffert.
Baffert, yeah. Baffert, I read that New York Times article about the Colts being Medina Spirit being losing the win, and on the cover of the Times was a little, like, we call it a reefer, like it refers to a larger article, so like the big stories get a tiny reefer at the bottom of the front page, and it said Medina Spirit stripped of its win. But what you don't see in the reefer is Medina Spirit died in a training in a breezing. It's before he was stripped of his win. Like that. And there's thunder. And there is really a tremendous amount of abuse that needs to be uncovered in order to better horse sports. And then there's also just weird stuff, like the really fascination of very wealthy Argentinian polo players in creating whole herds of clones, which is happening in Argentina. They have 9 and 10 of the same horse, which is just fascinating to me. So there's like technological innovation, abuse, and untold stories. But that's what governs my journalism in general, whether it's horsey or not.
Really good points. And I I agree with what you said about reaching out to people. That's how I got acquainted with Ashley, and it's Avis, not Davis, with an A. And it was during COVID, and I had already been assigned a story on Black Beauty, and I was going through the agent and couldn't be, and then the agent wasn't working with her. I just went to her website. She answered. She said, "Would you like to Zoom?" And it went from there. And it was remarkable too. I've written about, other journalists, other people in the film business, but she really made that happen. And it was one of these remarkable stories that's really neat to tell. And and reaching her Wild Beauty Foundation, she ended up starting that. But even thank you, Julie, for the webinar that you did, because Sarah was not on my radar before that. And it brought Horse Crazy to my attention. And I think what you're doing too, and you're right about policing. We need to police our own industry before somebody goes, oh, dirty underwear, so we can promote it too and bring in new people. But what you're doing, I'm thrilled that you would take time to do this, and also just what you're doing for you to jump into the horses like this and talk about it is so important.
A pleasure. And it's so smart that you went around the gatekeeper, because I learned this the hard way, because I had no involvement in Hollywood till very recently. And a friend of mine told me, like, I couldn't get through an agent. I couldn't get through their agent with such a good story. So, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, don't you know that the publicists, their job is to keep you away?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" She's like, no. She's like, their job is to,
Wow.
They're not trying to actually get through. And I just, like, I had to, like, so now I never go through them if I can help it. And also, like, don't go through front doors, to get your story told. Always go through the window, right? Go to the barn door, like, it's your story deserves to be told. I believe that about everybody's story.
Well, I won't say that with every publicist because I jumped the fence too. And I think the key to, it's the same thing as a story. A lot of times when you're calling and trying to get, an answer, if you're on a deadline, whoever picks up the phone may be the one that gets in the story,
Yeah.
whether there's a gatekeeper or not. And also, a lot of the publicists are so busy with their social media agenda that they don't really pick up the phone.
Yeah. For sure.
Anyway, I'm thrilled what you're doing. So what is this next book? You have 4 books now. Can we ask about that? Or is, I know. it wasn't on the
Sure.
agenda.
I want to answer your question about your guys' future books, but I have a children's series coming out with Cameron Books, an imprint of Abrams. It's called Once Upon a Horse. And it's about, I'm very proud of that title because originally it's called like Horse Tales. And I was like, God, no. I feel very good about Once Upon a Horse. And it's true stories from the equestrian world that are fictionalized for middle grade children. So the first one, and actually some of them are chapters in my book told in a new way. So the first one is about my horse Trendsetter, obviously, I'm obsessed with him. And it's about basically the horse, the Trendsetter came, it's called the Flying Horse. No, the horse, the Flying Horse. And Trendsetter flew because he went on an airplane from Holland to meet me when I needed him most. But in that book, Trendsetter fails at everything he does. He's lots of talent, no direction. And there's this girl named Sarah, and she is dyslexic and doesn't want to reveal it. Also me, and stops doing homework and fails at everything she does too. And in the end, they find each other, and the moral is you don't have to be good at anything to be loved. You just have to be good. And I think that's a lesson that I really needed in my life when I was told I was stupid. And I was like, I don't think I am. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty smart. But if you say so, okay. Because I can't spell, and I still can't spell, and I'm a professional writer. So that's the first one. And then the second one is about Cheryl White, who written with her brother. She's the first ever female Black jockey to win a race in America. And she did it when she was 17 years old. And she's the coolest person ever. Wait, I'm gonna get a picture of her. One second.
And that puppy is so unconcerned. Look at that face, just laying there like.
I know, what a good dog.
We're work from home buds. He's really used to it. So this I just got off eBay of Cheryl right after her first win.
Wow. When was that?
1971.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But
So
who took a chance on Cheryl? I don't know Cheryl's story.
you got to know it. We're gonna blow her up. That's actually, I'm in conversation about 2 movies about her too right now. So that's why I've learned this optioning thing. But Cheryl's dad, this is her dad. So he was a racehorse trainer, and she couldn't get rides because she was a young Black girl, and she actually couldn't get them from her dad because he was kind of misogynistic, thinking this is a boy sport. And then he did end up running her, and she ended up being a very, very successful jockey. And actually, this says on the back of it, can't get rides. It says, this is shortly before her first win, after she had already passed probation. It said, Cheryl White, 17, walks with her trainer, her father, Robert White, at Cleveland's Thistledown Racetrack, where she broke barriers and became the nation's first Black female jockey. But she says she's having trouble getting rides and thinks it's either because she's a girl or because she's Black. 1971. And the answer is, it's because she's both. But it's about Cheryl's story, and it's fictionalized as well, lightly fictionalized her journey.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
And that's out now, or when will it be out?
That will be out in spring 2023.
And again, the publisher?
It's Abrams, but it's called Cameron Books.
So Sarah, as we've been working on our diversity, equality, and inclusion initiative in the industry, we've uncovered some amazing stories, just like Cheryl's, of people who, sort of overcame the odds and excelled in various aspects of the sport, and just some fascinating stuff that's out there. I'm a huge fan of course, Compton Cowboys and Cowgirls of Color, and a bunch of those groups that are out there that are just really not until recently getting any visibility, but have tremendous amount of community outreach and just, sort of impact on underrepresented communities. I mean, Cowgirls of Color takes, young African-American girls and teaches them to barrel race out of the inner cities and just do some fascinating things over there. So there's lots of little pockets of stories out there. If you don't know the woman that heads up the Herd Institute, she's just lovely. And she's, I believe, Asian American. And she also wanted to go into the hunter jumper world and found difficulties finding a barn where she thought she was going to be able to be accepted and make her story happen. So.
No, fascinating. We haven't even begun to delve into the story of, Asian Americans in riding. And, they've been sort of overlooked in this conversation about equity and inclusion, for sure.
There's also, I don't know if you know the Tom Bass seminar. Julie, have you been on that? That Melvin Cox has put together down at Tryon. It's happened, I think, 3 years. It's in October, and it really promotes African Americans and equestrian sports. And one of the webinars he did during Zooms, with the gatherings, had people from Europe involved, the FEI, among others. But he's Black. He's been in the TV production business, also had experiences with some students when he was teaching out in Santa Cruz, and went to the World Equestrian Games in Vegas. And I think that's what it was, World Cup. And he had some students that did not have proper treatment, and he was down there with his press credentials, and somebody asked him if he was the bus driver.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. He's a really good guy, but he's been putting this on, I think, 3 years, and it's called the Tom Bass Seminar, and Tom Bass was Black, and he has a story too.
Cool.
So yeah, anyway, it's something.
And there are a lot of stories that are, that's another thing, when you're looking for what someone will publish, it's the unexpected story, or it's coming at it from the angle people don't expect. I think Horse Crazy, when I pitched it, I actually ended my pitch that this isn't my story, this is the story the horses told me throughout my life. And the one pushback I got from the publisher said, actually, we think it is your story. Horses are deeply, deeply personal. I always say, when you look at a puppy or a kitty, you go like, oh, but when you look at a horse, you feel something, right? It's much more like looking at ocean waves or a mountain vista. And I think that to me speaks that they embody something much bigger. And so they really pushed me. I didn't anticipate Horse Crazy being memoiristic at all. And it ended up being, sort of 1/3, 2/3 nonfiction. But my story as a Jewish New Yorker, daughter of a Holocaust survivor, is not your typical, stereotypical equestrian pedigree. My parents like animals if they come in like a béarnaise sauce. So it's that atypicality ended up making the book more compelling to publishers. Yeah.
Well, I would also think the fact that you were so well known for your investigative work, that would be yet another twist of, hey, she's coming at this from both that mindset plus her passion for the horses. So it made it sort of a little intriguing.
It could have worked against me. When I had that meeting with the publisher about doing my investigative story as a book, I said, well, I don't really want to, it was like so depressing. I couldn't do it for another year of my life. And he said, well, what do you want to write about? And I said, ponies. And, it could have backfired too. So you never know, that's not how they see me. And my agent has now said the opposite. Said, you don't want to become the horse girl author, and except I said, well, Marguerite Henry did 49 books. I think she was just fine being the horse girl author. So, not putting myself on her level, but I'm okay with having an expertise and not thinking of it as being marginalized.
Anybody else? Questions for Sarah?
Are you available for interviews too? I think there are probably some journalists on here.
Yes, I'm always available for interviews. You can reach me at Horse Crazy the Book on Instagram. That's the easy one to remember. Or my name, Sarah Maslin Nir at Gmail. So sarah.maslin.nir at Gmail.
My challenge for Ashley and Emily, since they work with me at the Horse Council, is how to take Sarah's advice and scale it down for our press releases and the things we do.
I was like, okay.
The challenge we have is trying to get that story across, get that message across, but in a bite-sized kind of way, and get it out there, in public viewing. So
I think we just need to make it more relatable.
Relatable, yeah.
I have experienced that because as a journalist, you pitch your stories. Everybody thinks that's like, because they watch Spider-Man and what's the guy in Spider-Man? It's like, get me Peter Parker. It doesn't happen that way at all. You come with all your own ideas. So I pitch stories all the time, all day long. And there's a formula to it. and a lot of times I'll get in my inbox from pitches from PR folks like you guys, and they say at the subject, a pitch, like I will never click on it. You know, you got to give me a pitch that says, that opens my eyes, you know. Let's see, I'm just thinking, what's a good one I've gotten recently? You know, okay, here's an example. Like, there's a bar in the Hamptons. Surf Lodge reopens for the first time in a year. For me, but you know, you could get me with, after a devastating pandemic, the Hamptons are ready to party, you know, and then I'm like, something like that, you know. So the subject is very, very important. A pitch from the American Horse Council, a pitch from, even a pitch of a story, my book idea, kill me. Then you need to tell it like you're telling your best friend at a bar. So when you have a great story and something awesome happened at work or whatever, you go to your friend at a bar and you go, you won't believe what happened. You know, Julie did this and it was really fascinating because it actually has super significance for what the purposes of the horse counts are going to be. And it's going to be majorly impactful and you should really keep up with this. That's how you're going to tell your friend something awesome happened, right? And it's kind of, here's what happened, here's why it's significant, and here's why you need to hear more. And that kind of even lightness of tone can really compel people to read further. You know, we often think when we're sending New York Times, people send me deeply formal stuff, and I'm still just a human. So if you were pitching Simon and Schuster, you might send like, to whom this maketh her, dear editor. It is, you know, I would let, no, you know, dear editor, I would start, if you're to, you know, a fascinating history happens on the shores of Chincoteague. Every day, horses swim in and out of the ocean, and yet their environment is threatened. But you know, you gotta get them. So your first paragraph is something like that, and I would envision it telling it to your best friend at a bar the day after something awesome happens. That's like how I think about it. And then the next paragraph is, here's a little bit more of the detail. And then the third paragraph is, here's why I'm the best person to go to. Here's why I'm the expert. And you give a little bang, bang, bang of your credentials. I think pitches should be no more than 3 paragraphs. And then you might attach something to it that says like, for more, click here. But you know, eyes glaze over. And that goes for pitches for story ideas, pitches for book ideas. You're certainly just getting, I like to think of pitch, rather than pitch, think of it as like throwing a crumb for a koi fish. You know, the koi fish comes and then you can reel it in.
I love it.
Great analogy. I like that a lot. Okay. Anybody else questions for Sarah? Sarah's put her email, I believe, her contact information into the chat, so you can make a note of that. And she has always been so gracious to do lots of fun things. I'm going to have her for our conference probably next year. My agenda this year got really packed full. So if you have not, or you're interested, Sarah, we're having our conference in June in DC in person, first time in 2 years. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed it goes smoothly. But then we're doing a virtual recap, about a 2 or 3 hour recap the following week, and you'll get to hear excerpts from some of the speakers and that kind of thing. So pick up on that, and I'll send you a Zoom link so you can listen into some of those things and see what you take away from that. It's really fascinating. We're having a conversation about different types of reactions that our industry had from the pandemic, you know, sort of silver linings and things that happened that turned out to be good things we were really anxious about. We have a woman from the Livestock Conservancy who's going to come and talk about preserving equine genetics, which should be quite interesting. If you know Janet from over at Morris Animal Foundation, she's going to be talking about one of your subjects, importance of research, why we do it, how we use it, you know, that kind of thing. So some really great speakers for a conference this year.
Interesting. Great. Well, I'm happy to do in the future. I'm always happy to help you. You guys do really vital work in preserving and expanding the industry. So I really appreciate it.
Great. Anybody else got a last question for Sarah before we wrap up here?
Where are you located now? Are you still back in New York on the East Coast, or are you jumping back and forth? Okay. I'm
in New York City, and I will tell everyone that on Sunday, I'm throwing a huge event that you're all invited to, Sunday, May 22nd, Gallop NYC, New York's largest therapeutic riding organization. We're bringing horses back to Central Park. with a promenade on horseback of veterans and disabled children and adults, including recipients of a Purple Heart and a Gold Star Mother, and descendants of the Buffalo Soldiers, which was the U.S. Army's all-black cavalry. And we are promenading in a show of therapeutic horsemanship through the park. And then we're ending with a party at the Museum of the City of New York, a gala sponsored by L'Oreal. We're going to have a celebrity stylist there who will be doing people's ponytails and a real pony's ponytail in the museum.
Oh, I love it.
It's going to be ridiculous, and you're all invited. You can look, it's a link in my Instagram, Horse Crazy, the book. You can find it to buy tickets. The parade is free. The party is a tax-deductible donation. And the foundation is Gallup NYC.
So Sarah, I sent that little tidbit over to a lot of the contacts I have that are sort of local to New York City, hoping that you'll get some more attendees for that. All of them are big supporters of therapeutic riding and of veterans. So a good match there. So that's great.
I can just jump into, this is the kind of thing that makes the huge difference for the horse industry. I know Julie knows, I don't know if Sarah does. I worked for Cavalia, the equestrian spectacle from the co-founder of Cirque du Soleil back in its early days, particularly when people couldn't even pronounce the name. And being able to reach the mainstream public, like what you're doing, even this thing with the ponytails. We started having a horse birthday party when I found out that two of the horses in the show, which were true brothers, were born on the same day, different years. Man, the media sucked that up. They were there watching the horses dig into their carrot cakes. And it's, you know, what you're doing, even with the ponytails, the pony, you know, braiding that kind of is going to bring in all kinds of things that people that wouldn't think about horses normally. And then they're going to be paying attention to what you're doing. Putting all these elements together like this, this is exciting.
Great.
So maybe
Ryan, come cover it.
I don't know if I can make it this weekend, but I know somebody that we can do a story on it, probably.
Wonderful.
Okay. And then, so yeah, this is exciting. So thank you for sharing that too. And thanks for letting me jump in here again.
Of course.
Nope. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your time today, and we'll probably have the recording up and available sometime tomorrow afternoon, maybe. We'll see how our staff time goes to get it all kind of prettied up a little bit. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and have a great week.
Great.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye.